One is univocal language, describes things between two parties in an exact one-to-one comparison, and then equivocal language, which is meaning of the term that changes dramatically, which is like the fallacy of equivocation. I talk about like a dog barking and the bark of a tree, for example, would be a classic case of that. The analogical language, he claims, is the meaning of terms which proportionally are different in the beings being described. So he compared a good dog being different than a good human. But I think with that, there still has to be some sort of comparison in analogical language, and I think we see that in with the Bible saying that we are made in God's image. So there's something that humans and God can have in common. To God, it will be a proportionally different degree, according to Sproul. But there's still going to be some comparison, I would think. So that goes into, I guess, part 10 and 11, where it's contradiction versus paradox. And Sproul says, well, okay, a contradiction is A cannot be A and not A at the same time in the same sense. I think we all agree with that. And he says a paradox is a statement that apparently is a contradiction, but might be true. A classic case of a paradox is like the sentences. Now it's a paradox because I claim that the sentence is false, so therefore it's a paradox.
Actually, it would be more something where, like, Jesus says, in order to save your life, you must lose it. And on face, it looks like, it's a contradiction, but as you think about it,
through that sacrifice. And we'd say we're all made of the same substance, carbon-based material, so how do we make sense of three persons yet the same essence? What does that mean, essence?
Sure. Okay, well, you would agree that, well, let me say that to make a distinction between being and essence. Now, being is whether something is, and an essence is. So you could say dinosaur is, and you could say what is a dinosaur, and you would predicate about that dinosaur, and that would be describing the essence of it. And there are different essences to different things, but the essence is what something is. But we need to make a distinction that something exists or doesn't exist would be its being. And when we say that God has one being, we're saying that it is one ontology with three persons. And it does not violate the law of non-contradiction because you've got two separate categories. The law of non-contradiction says something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. So we're talking about two different separate categories. Person is not being. So a great example would be when you see a tricycle, you say, oh, there's a tricycle. It has the being of tricycleness, or it is a tricycle, but it does not have personhood. Okay? And so there are different things and such.
None of that what you said makes any sense to me.
Yeah, gibberish.
Oh yeah.
I think the problem is, Trey, that you're talking about the substance of God, right? I mean, God is an immaterial substance, right?
Well, that which is self-existent must be immaterial.
No, that's just utter bollocks.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
So Trey,
would you like me to continue?
Do you agree that God is immaterial?
Yes, he must be.
He's an immaterial.
Because materiality
is Jesus an immaterial substance?
Jesus is an accidental property that is not necessary to the essence of God.
Is being material a substance?
Being material is a substance.
Is matter a substance? And is it a substance that's different from being immaterial? Are there two distinct substances between? I mean, are you? I don't know if you are. Are you a substance dualist, for instance?
I don't know what that is.
So, do you think that the mind is a distinct substance from the body?
Well, yes, of course. If I'm a Christian,
Right.
don't you think that's kind of follows logically?
Yeah, no, well, a lot of Christians do, but not necessarily all do. So the mind and the body are two distinct substances because the mind is immaterial and the body is material. So God the Creator, God the Father, is immaterial, and Jesus is material. So they're not one substance, are they? The two distinct substances.
Indeed, yes, that's what
Yeah.
Christianity teaches.
So the essence of Jesus is to be material, and the essence of God is to be immaterial.
The essence of Jesus is a man. Yes, of course.
We
He's not.
have
He's
two
not.
natures of Christ too, which is another
Right.
mystery.
Well, but that's what we're talking about right now. We're saying that the humanity of Christ is not essential to Christ. It's an accidental property he took on.
I don't know. I think that it is essential to a human to be human, isn't it?
Yes, a human is human.
Yeah. So it's essential to Jesus to be human. So it's an essential property.
No, it's not, because
how could Jesus not be Jesus and not be human?
he is human. He's 100% human. He
Right,
took
so
on the accidental property of humanity.
So would you say it's essential then of Jesus to be human?
No, because there was a time when he was not human, right?
Well, so when Jesus wasn't human, he was immaterial.
Or he had one nature, right?
Mm.
But now he has two natures.
Yeah, so that seems to be a change, and it also seems to be that prior to Jesus becoming material, right, the Jesus essence was merely, which is a part of God's essence, was merely potentially material.
I would not say a part of God's essence, because God must, by definition, be
Well,
simple. He cannot be composite.
well, whichever way you cut it. So God's essence was potentially material before it was material.
No, it did not. From our perspective, we can see a potentiality in Christ taking on nature.
we would say that of anything. I mean, it seems to be you can't have it both ways, Trey. If there is this singular essence that somehow has the capacity to, and it seems almost contradictory to say that something could be essentially immaterial, but also material. That seems to be quite very incoherent.
No, because the immateriality is asse, okay? It's self-existent. The material part is contingent. There's nothing wrong with asse being able to create contingency.
Right.
We got to affirm it, because you're making that conversation right now.
Well,
I mean, Fox, I think the whole argument here is a little besides the point, right? I mean, what God is made up of, or what Jesus is made up of, is not the issue, right? I mean, the issue is why these statements aren't contradictory, and it's because they are even in the same statement, like 3 and 1 as the description of the Trinity. The 3 and the 1 are used in a separate context. They're being used to describe different aspects of the same individual. So what Sproul here is saying is that an apparent contradiction can simply just be a paradox or a mystery, depending on the context of the statement. But of course, that goes against his original assertion that all contradictory statements are unintelligible, right? Suddenly, it becomes the context of the hearer that really makes the difference between contradiction and paradox and mystery. And I think that sort of destroys Sproul's point in that case.
I don't understand what you're saying there. You're saying that somehow, because a perceiver perceives something differently, therefore it makes the reality different?
That's true. I mean, Sproul goes ahead and says that a real contradiction will never be understood. But I mean, that's a potential. He has to make a prediction in order to say something like that, right? So,
do you
really
know
what it comes down to? Yeah, I mean, a contradiction is literally contra. I mean, it's the words, the exact opposite of the words being used. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right?
So you're predicating about something and it's incoherent, right?
A paradox is simply an apparent contradiction, right? And that is purely a subjective assessment of the contradiction itself. You have to infer the meaning of the word.
Well, sure, of course.
So the sort of certainty that Sproul wants to get about these contradictions and paradox and the distinction between the two is always predicated on an omnipotent or omniscient point of view, in which he can know either the future of the knowledge about the statement or the intention of the speaker of the statement. And I don't think that either of those is able to be distinguished.
Okay, here's a problem here, and he's covered this, I think, earlier on in that, is what you're saying is that sense perception can never bring certainty. Is that what you're saying? In order to apply the logic, which is certain, we have to use sense perception, which is not certain. Therefore, we cannot have certainty about something. Is that what you're assuming?
That's not what I'm saying at all. No, certainty is a scale, not in a destination. So it would be silly
because
to say
we
that
are
we can't have
contingent.
certainty because there's some element of unreliability to our senses.
Right.
We
That's exactly
use
what I
our
said.
senses to make that assessment, and we use our senses to confirm whether or not we should be certain about something. So
That's right.
I think it's besides the point to try to say that we can't be certain.
I guess the point I was trying to get across was when I speak to Trey, he will invoke this notion that God is pure act, right? But then the God essence actually seems to have a potential prior to the instantiation of the material being, right? And it could, it's like I could potentially become, I could stand up and walk around the room. That means that I then can't be pure act. Even if I had always existed, the fact that I could get up and do that and change means that in Trey's book, I could never be pure act. So the fact that he's appealing to this essence, this one singular essence, and actually down the road it's going to become something else, it's going to become material, and it isn't at that stage, seems to me that is a potential within God's nature that isn't yet acted upon, isn't yet actualized by God. So it seems to me that when we have these conversations where Trey constantly says, well, yeah, sure, we know that it could change. He will say, no, it can't change, because the moment if it could change, it means that there was something actual that it could later become, and that's contradictory to the nature of what he means by pure act. So I don't know if anyone else has come across that with Trey, but I find that a little bit strange.
So you're defining God then to be an effect by definition, right?
I never said that. I said...
You're saying he is potential.
I'm saying that Jesus is an effect.
Okay, you're saying that God is an effect in a sense then. In other words, he is both act and patient.
When God's essence causes the instantiation of Jesus, doesn't it? Is that right? So God causes Jesus. So Jesus is an effect by definition, right?
Yes, the humanity of creation.
Yes. Indeed. So that humanity of Jesus, that instantiation of Jesus as a physical being, right, didn't exist prior to that happening, right?
Yes.
So prior to that happening, that was merely a potential quality of the essence of God.
No,
so
the essence of God cannot.
How is that not the case? How can something be actualized if it wasn't potential before it was actualized?
From the perspective of, properly speaking, of aseity.
From our perspective, we're talking about from our perspective.
We can't understand it. That's the whole point of ontological
language. We can't understand it because it doesn't seem to make sense, Trey. It doesn't seem to make sense.
No, it's a mystery, but it's not
you're trying to have your cake and eat it here.
But that's what I mean by the observer or the hearer being the perspective that we're talking about here. I mean, if it's simply my understanding that's at stake here, I mean, how do we distinguish between a contradiction, a paradox, and a mystery?
Yeah, but also I'm just trying to hone in on this. I mean, it seems to be that one of the things that stops Trey from allowing us to talk about anything else, possibly filling in this role of an uncaused self-existent being, right? He says, well, you can't call it self-existent because only that which is pure actuality can be self-existent. And he says his God is pure act, that there's nothing potential about it. But it seems to me there is something potential about it, because at some point before the instantiation of Jesus doesn't exist as a physical being, at least. It's just God's undifferentiated essence. But that essence, although undifferentiated at that point, can be differentiated into the Trinity at a later point. As in, or at least the Trinity can manifest itself in other ways. So there's a potential manifestation of Jesus' essence, right, which is potential and isn't actual.
No,
before it's actual.
No,
it's potential.
Okay, Fox. Here's the deal.
How's it not?
When you walk down the beach, you affect the sand with your feet, and you can look and you can see that there are footprints in the sand. However, if we're to examine the bottom of your foot, you will also see that the sand is acting upon you. So you are both act and patient in that situation. But when God acts, he is not affected by that which he affects. He is pure act, and that which happens, but it's not a change in him.
You said that Jesus is God, right? So Jesus is God as a material flesh and blood being, was affected.
Well, he is
by himself. I'm not saying that, you know, he wasn't affected by his own essence, but there is still a shift in what that essence manifests itself as, right?
And Christ is an admittedly ignorant God as well. He admits to not being omniscient as well.
Yeah. So So if Jesus is God and Jesus is not omniscient, right? Then even though God is omniscient before he is Jesus, he's also potentially not omniscient, because he can make himself in the human form not omniscient. So again, you've got another potentiality of God's essence that isn't actualized, always actualized. So whichever way you cut it, it seems to be a change, and it seems to be a potential that is actualized.
Okay, but here's the problem. If you're going to define God as potential, the law of non-contradiction completely falls apart.
No, what you see, that's the problem is we don't think it does, Trey. And I think we can park that there, and I think we've shown that when you get to that point, there's an issue with it, and we can probably move on. But hopefully you'll be able to just...
There is no issue. God is pure act. He's not patient.
You can stipulate that and assert that all you like, Trey, but that seems to be, if those two things are whole and are true, I mean...
You haven't demonstrated it, my friend.
Well, I think I have, but I mean, I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add on that, or we should move on.
Just one thing, I'm having problems getting the focus to switch when you speak. I clicked on something and I've regretted it ever since. I can't get the focus to put on the person who's talking. Is anybody familiar?
Fine.
Click on Fox's window again. That should get rid of it.
No, you're not. Stop looking at mine.
You presented Fox, or you clicked on him, and by clicking on him, you're focused on him. If you done it.
It's working now. Jesus, I've been going nuts with that for the last 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah, I guess we can move on to...
Right, I'd just like to say, while I was doing all that, Trey was talking the most amount of bollocks I've ever heard, and the idea of pure actuality is utter drivel. I don't know why. I appreciate that the philosophers like talking in Aristotelian terms, and this pure actuality and pure potential. That's utter bollocks. And if you... I'm sorry, Fox, I'm probably offending him here. But this sort of archaic Aristotelian language does not get you anywhere. And if you want to talk about transitions between something having potential and actuality, it's just something that is in a state of not existing and then existing. That's all you need to go into. And this concept of actuality, pure being, I'm afraid, is a sort of ancient Aristotelian thing which I think is fed into current philosophy, and unfortunately is infected what's being taught, and should be pure actuality just means, as far as I'm concerned, existence. And if you don't exist, and everything has the potential from the start of the universe to us. And I have, unfortunately, I'll be ranting about essence next, but which.
Can I ask Trey a quick question that's related to that?
Sure.
So.
I'm sorry. Who are you? Who is this?
I'm Turtle.
Oh, hi, Turtle. Okay, nice to meet you. I don't think we met before.
We've had a little exchange in the
on chat
discussion board, yeah.
Okay.
So, do you believe that God does things independent of humanity? Like, essentially, what I'm asking is, would God have sent Jesus down to the earth if Adam and Eve had not committed the act of eating the apple or fruit or whatever?
No, why would he?
Isn't he then contingent on the actions of humanity?
No. I mean, there's an essence where God is sovereign over all. We've got two worlds that we've got to live in. We've got to live in the world of phenomenology, or phenomenological, as we see things, anthropomorphic, where stuff happens, and then you've got the realm of pure being, where nothing happens and it's an incommunicable attribute. That's why we have to use analogical language.
Bollocks. I mean, that's just drivel first order being spouted there.
Okay, well, you're quite the great thinker, Rumpus, I must say.
Well, in comparison to you, I think so. Yes.
Again, analogical language, it doesn't mean something completely different. That's
a good point, Floyd.
it's just to a higher degree, but there's still something in common. So you simply can't say, oh, it's just inconceivable and something beyond us. No, it's just something like us to a greater degree.
That's the whole point of it. If there were no analogical language, there'd be no point. So yes, I agree with you completely.
But the problem is true when you say things like that. I mean, Sproul's presentation himself, he says that he's all about, well, he's all against the people who say, well, God is just this wholly other being out there that we can't grasp, right? He doesn't want that. He thinks that's a bad road to go down.
Well, that's exactly what.
So he tries to reel it back, and he's trying to start from say, well, we can have some kind of bridge, right? We can bridge these. There are going to be things that we can't quite grasp about God in their entirety because we're not omniscient, but we can get some paler reflection of it that still makes sense to us. So when you come up against a problem that seems to be a complete, there is no bridge across there, right? You just say, well, that's just because of analogical language, which actually analogical language is supposed to be the bridge.
That's exactly right. So Fox, you're saying if I'm not omniscient, therefore there is no communication. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that, Trey. I'm saying that
communication
when we don't get communication
requires non-omniscience, Trey.
You're saying there's no such thing as analogical language. You're just saying everything is equivocal or univocal.
I'm not saying that, Trey. I'm saying that I think that approach is not from Sproul isn't necessarily a bad one, because if it is just the case that there's these uncommunicable attributes to God, then what's the point? We can't talk about it, and it just becomes this pure matter of faith. But he's at least trying to say, no, we can understand that maybe to a lesser degree we can still get the core concepts right. There isn't anything when we come up against, we don't come up against like huge conceptual blocks. We just come up against the ability to not quite grasp the scope and scale of these attributes of God. But we should still be able to get some of the basics, right? And some of them are at least reflected in us. So there is a common ground. But the problem is when it appears there isn't a common ground, that's when you make the appeal to analogical language, when the analogical language is supposed to be the common ground. It's a very strange move that you specifically make, Trey, that I don't think Sproul makes.
I disagree, Flux. I think Sproul does, in fact, make that move. I mean, he defines an analogical language as the ratio between the difference of the two things being compared, which I think is a really incomplete way of talking about analogical language when we're talking about something that it really has a similarity. I mean, I think that needs to be central in the definition. So I think in a lot of ways, the analogical part is sort of defined by Sproul in the negative sense rather than the positive.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we get a lot from Christians who, we say, oh, God is not this, God is not that, God is not this, but we never hear the positive end, so you really can't make any sense out of it.
That's right. That's why we have to have apathetic affirmations about God, because if you have something, let's see, I think it was Stephen Charnock, he's a Puritan, excellent theologian, he said, we cannot know God as he is, but let us not imagine him to be something he is not. And so a lot of theology proper is apophatic or negative theology because it is incommunicable. For the moment that you communicate that attribute, it becomes something. It's really simple.
Simple? I know, it sounds very vague to me.
Yeah, it does.
In other words, made up.
Yeah, it's a way of...
Oh, yeah, Mischievous Heathen. Yeah, you got
it. The circle.
Mr. Intelligence.
I like Camille's assessment for the analogical language. I think it was Camille last week, but I'm not sure. But he says that, and quote me, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but he said, whenever I don't know if Trey, I don't really speak to that often, but uses analogical language, it's kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, kind of whenever you bring something up, it's like, oh, analogical language. And
yeah, which is my point, is that it's analogical language, I think, is trying to I mean, you can say whether or not Sproul's successful in that, but it is supposedly trying to do the opposite of that, right? It's not just a card that you pull whenever something seems to not make any sense to the person and go, that's just analogical language. So I don't do that. You do that, Trey.
I always link it to a logical corollary to what we're talking about. Always.
I don't think so. I don't think you do. I mean,
well, you don't like it. That's fine.
Well, no, I think the most famous one is the unchanged changer discussion that you had.
In different relationships. Yeah, imagine that.
But you didn't get across how it is that something which is fundamentally unchanging can also change.
Properly and improper of speaking. I mean, it's all the same thing. It's really simple. In other words, we're living in a land of becoming. We are becoming people. The only way we can understand something, is to predicate about it. How do you predicate about that which does not change?
So what is this drivel? This drivel is just a spout of just.
So Trey, an unchanging changer can change. Then that's not a contradiction. That's fine.
And yes, in different relationships. It's just like we just talked about.
So it's not unchanging. So it's only. Is it temporarily unchanging then? I mean, that seems a vacuous thing to say. I mean, some things.
No. What is time, Fox?
Uh-oh, here we go.
What? Yeah. Indeed. So you would say that God is unchanging before time, and then changes with time.
No, he's unchanging even now. He's not being acted on, Fox. Otherwise, he's in effect.
You are saying that he is totally and essentially unchanging, and yet he does change.
The excuse is it's a paradox, not a contradiction.
Seems to be a contradiction to me.
I agree, but that's why Sproul brings that up, because when you raise questions like that, he can say it's a different relationship, even though, you know what I mean?
But then the different relationship, then surely that passes it out at some other point. But I'm not. But this is supposedly an absolute statement. So under no conditions and in no circumstances.
I didn't say he was a full shit, Fox. I agree with you. I'm just
yeah, but it clearly is. Like, if X is unchanging, totally, utterly, necessarily unchanging, then it is impossible for X to change, right? So if X is necessarily changing, it is impossible for X to change. So how is it then that if X is necessarily unchanging, that X can change?
I never said he could.
But
I'm saying the contingent manifestation of Christ, yes. But I'm saying
God in the act of creation, isn't the act of going from not being a creator to being a creator, isn't that a change?
No, it's an effect, but it's not affected.
But that effect is brought about by God, and God wasn't always. Do you think that?
And you understand that by looking at time, right, and change, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it seems to be a change.
So becoming. See, do you see the alternative to what you're saying? Because what you're doing is you're saying that we must have an eternal regress of things happening without.
Isn't logically or metaphysically impossible, and you've never been able to show me how.
Oh my gosh! Because you equivocate on the term nothing. You say nothing is something.
No, I don't say nothing is something. I say that. If you say that the universe never began to exist and has always existed, then you're essentially saying there was never a state where there was ever nothing, right?
But it's an effect, right?
No, I'm not saying that. Saying that each state.
Oh, so it doesn't change. Change is an illusion.
Trey, why are you doubling up on the word salad? So we're saying that each event is caused, right? And there is never a beginning. So wherever you are, there's always an infinite number tacked onto the other side. So there's nothing logically impossible about that.
Well, sure there is. Because every one of those causes is, before it's a cause, it's an effect, right?
Before it's a cause and its effect. No, before. Well, so each event is an effect of a prior event.
Right. So before
there was never
cause, it was an effect, right?
There was never, and you need to remember this, Trey. There was never a first event.
Yeah, we can say the universe has always existed. That the sum of all matter and energy is not an effect. It was not cause. It always existed eternally, but there's always been changes within it since time started.
Yes. So you're saying that it's both being and becoming at the same time in the same relationship. You can't have both.
No.
But how's that, Jim?
No, that's not true at all.
It isn't as if you can't. It isn't as if. Do you think things that are becoming don't have being, as they are becoming?
Oh yes, there's a continuity. There must be a continuity of being. However,
right, okay, and that's all we're saying.
Something is both act and patience in the same ontology is ridiculous, because what it is.
Well, something can be actual and potential at the same time. I mean, I'm actual now, right? I'm actually a person, but I could potentially be, I don't know.
You'll potentially become a senior citizen.
Yeah, I could potentially I could potentially become a father. I could potentially.
We were once infants, and then we reach adolescence, and then adulthood.
Potential at the same time, it isn't. The only thing you can't be is wholly actual and non-potential, and then potential at the same time. That would be the contradiction.
Right. Right.
Yeah, this way you can be a
we're saying.
father,
That's my point.
son, and a
But that's
brother,
not-
so forth.
But that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that every event, right, that is actual, it could potentially change to be something else.
Right.
Right. So
It
you get
was
another event.
potential though before it was actual, right?
It was potential before it was actual. Yes.
Okay.
And then-
So potentiality is the foundation for everything.
The problem is, Trey, you seem to imply, right, that there has to be an initial. You're begging the question of an initial, purely actual point, a starting point. We're not saying that. We're saying that
I am referring to the law of non-contradiction, and you're denying it.
I'm not denying it. This is exactly
You're
what
not denying it at all. No.
Straight from the RC Sproul.
Demonstrate that. Demonstrate that.
Straight from the RC Sproul.
See, this is typical of you, Trey. You simply do not provide an argument. You just provide a statement, an assertion that's just bollocks because you can't present the argument, and therefore you and therefore you deflect. And this is what's infuriating about you.
You say your God is actual, yet he has potential to create Christ, to create material.
Okay,
all that potentiality.
Yeah,
in actual being.
And he's interacting also with everything on the earth. He's also parts of him are being nailed to crosses, in theory. And
he's
presumably,
he's all
day
powerful,
3,
right?
he had
So
the potential to create what was on day 4, 5, and 6.
And does Trey
potential to
believe
create
that
other
prayer?
universes.
Does Trey believe that prayer works? He's interacting with human beings, and presumably Jesus is a change. I mean, it's a manifestation on this on the world. That's quite clearly some sort of change has occurred there. Unless he's going to dismiss all the bodily, physical manifestations, and there's nothing actually there that has in fact come down to earth.
I'm waiting for an opportunity to respond. Can I? Okay.
Yeah.
Fox, you just told me that every actuality started out as a potential, right?
Yes, you could say that. Yeah.
Okay. So the foundation for the universe is potentiality, which is an effect by definition, right?
So
Who said it's an effect by definition? Where did that come from?
Can you say that again, Trey? Can you say that again? I didn't
Sure.
quite.
You said that every actuality is first a potentiality.
Yep. Yeah.
So the foundation for the universe
there's no
is
foundation.
potentiality, right?
There is no foundation.
It starts with potential, right?
We're not. The exact point of a beginningless is that there isn't a start, right? A beginning starts.
Every actuality starts out as a potential, right?
I'm saying that between every actual event, there is a preceding potential event.
Right. So
and
potential.
So on into infinity, right? And infinity.
So you have an
isn't
infinite regress of events without causes, right?
And of events without causes. Not every event has a cause. Right?
Of potential.
No, every effect has a cause. Get it right. You got it wrong there.
I did actually. Sorry.
Oh, event effect. That's such a childish.
No, you plonker. Look, you plonker. You're gonna have to get this. We're gonna have to sort this out because we've got to get this through to this idiot. An event is an event, a subset of which is an effect. That's how we're going to define it. And if you don't like that definition, we'll come up with some other definition of a state of something going from one state to another in a period of time. If you don't like the word event, we'll think up somewhere else. Splodge was the one I think I offered to you in our situation. But if you don't like, so just simply defining an event as an effect is just retarded. Absolutely.
Define
retarded.
it so that it's pure actuality.
Even RC Sproul himself, and we discussed this last week, brought up the point where he said anything identified as an effect has a cause. Those were his exact words.
Yeah.
And he said it multiple times. But it has to be identified as an effect.
Okay. And I want the rumpus to define an event in such a way that it is a cause. In other words, pure actuality. Go ahead.
That's what. Sorry, I didn't understand that piece of bollocks.
Smart.
I didn't understand that piece of bollocks.
He doesn't have to.
First of all,
I've defined the position. An event is can be, not necessarily, but can be uncaused, just like an electron can leap around.
Does it happen by definition, Rumpus? This is
this is the classic line. This is the absolute bollocks. This is where you switch terms.
But it's not an effect, and there was no cause.
You stupid bastard.
Now don't get rude.
No, when you know that we've been over this.
That's what you need to understand. Not all events have to be effects.
Why are you guys upset if you're so?
Because you're
and again, the universe does not have to be an event. The universe could be eternal. In some, an
eternal regress of effects without causes.
Hold on, Trey asked me a question. Can I just
Isn't what we are saying?
You can say the same of your God.
Trey asked me a question. Does it?
You don't understand causality.
His classic line to "Can you have events without causes?" is he then responds every single time, guaranteed as part of his script because he can't understand it, is to say, "Does it happen?" Yes, an event does happen, but that has no more necessarily got to have a cause than an event does. Just because you've redefined, just because something that happens is something that a change of state in time, doesn't mean it's any more got to have a cause than an event is. Just by changing the name, does it happen? How in your little mind do you think by saying "does it happen" changes the definition of an event without a cause? What in your little mind are you thinking of? You think that it validates your position?
I would love to know what John thinks about it, because I think he's a
so you can't offer it, right? So you can't offer it any
the problem
argument.
is that there's a lot of The problem is that there's a lot of burden shifting that goes on. So I mean, I've lost it. I was trying to keep a tally of the count, but whenever somebody has an objection to something Trey says, he has to at least 9 out of 10 times answer it in the form of a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either asking a question directly back, or he'll state something and he goes right at the end because he knows if he. Hold on. He knows if he just states what he wants to say, his position, it's bollocks, as you guys would say on the East Coast. Or I mean, I'm sorry, over the in Europe.
Okay, well, what's the difference between an eternal universe and an eternal God, both of which are acting?
Well, we've got one that is necessarily changing, and we've got one that does not change. It is not affected by anything. Do you agree that the universe is affected, Floyd?
As a whole, no. As a whole, the sum total energy in the universe is always zero.
Yeah.
You don't know.
God is affected by the action of humans.
You cannot use the same ontology. If you're going to say the universe changes and then say, oh, as a whole, when we add a whole bunch of changes together, somehow they never happened. How do you do that?
No, things are happening all the time. Just as God's changing into Christ, just as he's making all sorts of events.
No, because that which is self-existent is not changing, and you affirm that the universe is changing. So what you're doing is
hold on, no, we do not. You know, Trey, this again. You're either very, very stupid or you're a liar. You know goddamn well that we do not accept that. Sorry, Floyd, are you telling me off or something? I don't know if you were. I missed it. You damn well know that we do not accept that a self-existent universe is immutable. You have not demonstrated that a self-existent universe is immutable. You've just asserted
self-existence purely means it wasn't created. Nothing.
This is the classic Trey. He says, "Oh my God," when he has no argument. Demonstrate now the logical necessity of immutability because something's self-existent. Go on, do it now, and don't ask a question.
Okay, here we go. Now, if something changes, is it subject to that which affects the change?
Question. Nothing has to affect. Nothing has to create the change.
Oh, so when something changes, then there's nothing else involved in that change.
It could be. It's logically possible.
Yeah. Just itself changes, like metamorphosis. It's been over this number of times.
And so then it's an effect by definition in its ontology, right?
What do you mean it's an effect by
definition?
definition?
This is so funny about Floyd.
No.
Floyd, we go over and over this, and you just keep repeating the same thing over and over.
No.
The universe can have changes just as your God changed into a living
the universe
Christ.
Is not self-existent.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah.
Yes, it can be.
Who says?
I want to see him demonstrate that.
You can't.
How can it be pure actuality and pure?
That's
just driven. That's just driven.
You are asserting. Can I just say something, Trey? All we need, right? All we need is either to demonstrate that it's logically possible that the universe had no beginning and is past eternal, or we could also show that the universe began to exist uncaused, right? Now, we don't need, so an uncaused first state doesn't necessarily have to be purely actual, right? At least not with all of the loaded on extra bits that you get with Aquinas. We don't need all of that, because all we need to account for, okay, is how that first event caused all the other events, and itself wasn't.
We don't need to justify that, right? We don't ask that question. Remember what you said about Carl Sagan?
You need that's irrelevant, Trey. That's all we need, right? So you insisting that we go to the Aristotelian terminology, right? Isn't it has to be argued for why we need to go there, Because
You
what
need
we're
to
saying,
demonstrate a
saying
false,
is,
my
let me
friend.
finish. Well, no, that isn't true, because it isn't the case as if all concepts have just been captured by Aristotle and that's it, and then by Aquinas and that's it, and then we have to they've got the ball and we have to take it off them. What we're saying is we're trying to account for the apparent causal contingency of events and things within the universe, right? So we could say, well, perhaps that causal contingency just goes infinitely into the past and it never began. And for all of your sniggering and all the rest of it, you can't show the logical contradiction.
I do it. I've done it
but
several
you
times
can't.
now.
And then the other option that we're trying to give you is the universe may have begun to exist uncaused, or it may have just had a first temporal edge and never began to exist, as in it never had a first moment of temporal becoming. So these three options that we're putting on the table, they're all logically possible. They're all countering to you, and you've been told by RC Sproul that they're the equivalent to self-creation, which is obviously absurd because that's not at all what we're positing. So
you are.
No, we are not positing that. You can't show that we are.
You're saying it's an effect. It affected itself before it was because it's on the.
There isn't anything necessary. I've told you this before about retrocausation. Look it up. It isn't necessarily logically contradictory. There are some arguments against it. I don't tend to go there because it isn't something of a.
It's rubbish.
Looks like that. No, you can say it's rubbish, but until you've read the papers and the articles that discuss
make the argument.
Well, the idea is that it's retrocausation is that A can cause B, and B can cause A. Right? You can have. I mean.
So two effects affecting each other without any actuality.
What? How is that? How did you get that from what I just said? How did you get that from what I just said? So A
can only go one way in the ultimate sense.
So you've got A. You know that A caused B, right? And then B retroactively causes A.
Now, no, that's in a contingent sense, but they're both effects, right? First.
And they're both effects, but they're both causes.
First.
They're both causes. Well, A causes B, okay? But it turns out that what caused A was B.
Right, and they're both effects, though, right?
So you're begging the question against retroactive causation at this point, Trey. You're essentially saying
you're begging the question.
It's impossible. No, you're saying it's impossible because it has to work this way.
Right, to be rational.
It has to work this way because it's impossible that it doesn't work this way. It's called begging the question. That's exactly.
No, you're begging the question.
Now, I don't, like I said, I don't tend to usually draw that out, but actually, people look it up. I'm not saying I've looked into it enough to say that I think that I would endorse that as an option to say for how the universe exists, that loop. It's a logical possibility. It could have happened. I don't put too much stock in it. I tend to look at the other options or say we don't really have a good option. But we've got all these logical possibilities on the table, Trey, and you just can't seem to get them off other than by strawmanning them into saying that they're self-creation, which is absurd. And even then we say, well, self-creation, if we're talking about in terms of retrocausation, isn't logically possible.
You're projecting, my friend.
And then, Trey, I'm not projecting. I'm trying to show you that you consistently fail as RC Sproul, because we've looked at RC Sproul and we've seen that within him he doesn't have the resources to handle this. He equates the idea.
He doesn't have the resources.
He doesn't. He equates the idea of self-creation to be equivalent to spontaneous generation, right? And he says that spontaneous generation is self-creation. It's not. It isn't. Spontaneous generation doesn't say that. It refers specifically. I mean, as far as I'm aware, spontaneous generation is this idea that arose, and it actually arose in the ancients, but came about in the Enlightenment as a false inference of looking at things, say like a vegetative state of things, and then the assumption that, well, maybe that vegetative state brought about life. That life spontaneously generated from these conditions. So it doesn't mean that there was nothing prior to the spontaneous generation. It also doesn't mean that the spontaneous generation caused itself to exist before it began to exist. It doesn't mean any of that. So it's a completely flawed analysis, and it's also a straw man anyway, because most people would say that
enlightened philosophers who came up with it. What was the conclusion? Why did they come up with this?
They came up with it because they made, as I said, they made a false inference.
The God hypothesis is no longer necessary.
No. They were trying to come up with ideas about how to account for how life
without God. That's right.
Not necessarily without God, because for all we know, God could have been the first cause that set about the spontaneous
Well, go back and read
generation
your
rules.
history then.
Right? Well, no, this point I'm trying to get across, Trey, is this idea was falsified, you know, by, I think it was Pasteur came along, did some experiments to show that spontaneous generation...
Yes,
Well, no, he came along, showed this wasn't the case. And Sproul has the audacity to say that this is still something that atheists believe, that they believe...
Yeah, it's called abiogenesis. Same thing.
Are you saying that abiogenesis is self-creation? That before life existed to create itself before life existed? Is that what you're trying to say? That we honestly believe that?
But that goes against the straw man that Sproul is trying to build, with self-creation being equivalent to spontaneous generation, and I think that sort of goes against what you're arguing here, Trey.
It does not.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is abiogenesis is still being posited in God as the ultimate self-existing creating of the universe, right? So I don't understand how you can sit there and equivocate abiogenesis with spontaneous generation when it is included.
No. Are there people who posit abiogenesis without a God, John? That's the point.
Right. What does God have to offer?
No efficiency. They're saying creation without efficiency, in Aristotelian terms.
No, creation without foresight, creation without intention, but that's not
Right.
that's not quite
That's
the same.
exactly right. Sure it is.
That's not the same as without
Self-creation. So you've got
That's not
unintentionality, intending intentionality before intention exists. It's
No,
not-
it didn't intend it.
That's right.
Nothing,
That's
there's
the whole
no
point.
intention in the statement. So that you
That's
don't need
right.
the intention.
So you've got unintentionality giving rise to intentionality, something that is the exact opposite of its property.
That's a genetic fallacy, saying that you can't, because the original processes were unintentional, therefore they could never give rise to intentional processes.
Right. Molecules of water aren't wet, but a bunch of them together.
It's an emergent. We would say
That's
it was
not the
an
same
emergent
thing.
property.
We're talking about John.
It's an emergent
It's an
property.
analogy. It's an emergent property. It's an analogy of how you can get.
It's magic. That's what you're saying.
No,
It's
what's magic is saying that someone spoke a word.
God creating life is
I know.
magic.
The guy that believes in
Yeah.
God is accusing us of magic.
Where's Rudyard Kipling when we need him?
That women were created from ribs and all sorts of other bits of nonsense. That's magic. Right, and you would sit there and say to people who are actually trying to think out, good scientific theories, using what we understand about the world, what we know about the world, I invoking magic. I mean, it's quite insulting to those people, and it just shows your ignorance. Really.
Well,
Okay, can you guys hold just a second? I need to go and I need to do one more casting, and then I'll be done with that
Oh,
stuff. Can you
Google.
hold just two
Okay,
minutes?
why don't we move on to natural theology?
Okay.
Yes.
Can I take 2 minutes out, please?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Thank you.
yeah, get the fuck out. Sorry.
I still left the immutable thing unanswered as the uncaused events. I still want to pin these down because I'm this. Why does it happen?
Yeah.
Business.
I don't understand why the universe could always exist in some form of matter, energy, or maybe not even both. Maybe it was just some form that we're not aware of, and then changes occur.
Yes.
If you can I say one thing real quick before he comes back? I see a lot of RC Sproul's personality traits in a sense that Trey tends to mimic.
Absolutely.
And one of which is in his last set of videos, he goes on to explain how he's shown up several doctors and physicists and cosmologists and stuff like that. And he even Sproul at one point says, hey, I'm just this guy over here, in that false modesty that Trey likes to put on. But by the end of the story, he's shown the scientist, whoever field that guy's in, how wrong he is. And not only that, but he puts philosophy above the actual scientific discipline. Like, as in, he told a story toward the end. I'm not sure how far you guys got, but he said one of the physicists pled a case about a self-existent universe, what guys we were just talking about, and then he made mention that, he must have left his philosophy in the car or in the trunk or something, because I had to straighten him out with my philosophy.
Yeah,
And the guy was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned that a couple times, how philosophers are in a good position to critique statements for coherence, and I was curious about what you guys thought about that. Like, it seemed like that he was giving it as philosophers are somehow have a right to assess any proposition possible.
Right.
And I felt like that's not really good when you're talking about scientific jargon or various fields. It seems like that doesn't really apply.
But you can see it in Trey's attitude, right? Trey has, I would imagine, as much, you know, he's a layman just like the rest of, or most of us when it comes to science. I don't know what you guys do, but yet he's easily to dismiss like the real hard science, you know, physics and cosmology and all that. Not based on anything that he actually knows, at least I don't think, but based on a Sproul book, you know.
Mm. Yeah, and I find that I find it really obnoxious, but I find also that it's a very uncharitable interpretation that is then argued against in quite a lame way.
Yeah, when he tells these stories, he makes the person he's talking to sound like a complete moron. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, I've encountered it a few times of this idea that you can have very, very, very clever people. Okay, we can't say anything about their qualifications and their skills, but they're just they've got this hubris about them. They just forget the simple things. They forget the basic principles of logic, and they leave them behind, and then they go on to make these wild and ridiculous leaps and jumps in their work, and that's what is going on there. It's an attempt to. It's a very patronising attempt to say, well, yeah, we don't disagree that you're very clever people, but you're forgetting these very basic things. And also, Sproul says something to the effect that the reason is that we want to sin and the rest of it, and we want to just.
Can we move on to the?
No, I gotta say before we move on, I do agree with Rumpus in that there's a lot of burden shifting going on, and it's really. It stalls out the conversation in a sense because if Fox, Floyd, whoever brings up a point, it gets strawman questioned back to the person, and then everybody jumps in and starts arguing with Trey for like 10 minutes about it. But Rumpus has a good point. I would hold his feet to the fire. It's not our job to come up with the counter. It's his job to assert his assertion.
Yeah, sorry.
And just by simply saying, well, my position. For the fact that, well, you just violate the law of non-contradiction. That's bullshit, and we all know that.
Yeah,
so if we can stop.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm just saying if we can stop with the burden shifting, it's not going to get us anywhere.
There are two things I'm not going to let go here. One is this response that Trey has to every time we mention uncaused event. He says, "Does it happen?" As though that is an argument, and I want to see him articulate this non-argument so that we can all expose this utter drivel for what it is. So Trey,
right,
when you say, so I want to hear Trey explain why he thinks that when someone says proposes an uncaused event, such as happens with electrons and as could potentially happen with the universe, why he thinks the question "does it happen" is in any way relevant, and does he understand that an effect is a subset of events? So Trey, I'd like to answer those points.
Does it change? Remember we talked about this as a hangout, Rumpus.
Yeah.
Change.
Trey, I'm sorry. Can I just sorry, I'll just interrupt you there, because what happens is when someone presses you on why you have gone to happen, you immediately then go to change.
Yeah, that's a
and
great
if they
spot.
press you on change, you then go on to becoming.
Yeah.
And then when you go on to becoming, you lose
That's
interest.
right, because that's what the word means.
And
hang on a second. What is the word? What does the word mean, Trey?
Oh my goodness.
Can you say that again? You just
Could
said
it be
that.
any more clear? You guys could obfuscate
because
any words.
I tried really hard the other week to go through this with you and try to say what you mean by that's what the word means.
You did.
So
it means to change.
So what means to change? An event.
You've got being and becoming. Right. Do you understand those terms?
Yeah.
Fox?
Yes, we do. We get that, Trey. But can you go back to the original word we just talked about? You said that means. What does that mean? Because I worry that you lose and you just say these things, and I just want to know what you mean.
A being can't become something else or change as well.
And it doesn't make it any less of a being. And some beings never become.
It's ultimate. Remember, we talked about effect and cause. It's an effect before it's a cause. So initially, really,
No. We were talking about uncaused events. We were not talking about effects. Effects are a subset.
Can we
of
move
events.
on? Can we just move on?
No. I'm not letting you off the hook here, Trey. You're going to explain to us why you think you can justify an event that doesn't have a cause, and then you simply then say, why did it happen, as some sort of explanation. Then you say, it's a change. Yes, we know events are change. A definition I'm giving of an event is a change of state in a period of time, and I want you to understand that those do not necessarily have causes. And just by saying it happens, yes, we accept that. You seem to be saying, you seem to think that we don't understand that, and then you say it's a change.
No,
yes, we
don't.
know that as
Apparently
well.
you don't.
So explain why a change happening.
Just when a human being, a human being changes into adolescence. And what causes that? The essence or the nature of that human itself. It's the nature of humans to go from childhood to adolescence. That's the nature of human beings.
Floyd, are humans born?
Yes.
Okay, can we move on?
Yeah, unfortunately, Floyd, you just let him get away with that because you started moving on to things that were definitely effects. And I was pinning him down on uncaused events, and unfortunately,
you have the nature of a being. You have the nature of a being that changes over time because of its nature itself.
Trey, you still haven't explained.
I would like to move on to parts 12 and 13.
Okay. Well, it just does like to point out that Trey has not, under any, he's just simply dodged between happen, change, and becoming to avoid explaining the existence of uncaused events that we spot in the lab, and for which we have a full understanding of in a probabilistic session, like, things like electrons gibbering around. And Trey dodges. I mean, just expose this. The dodging that's going on by Trey is ultimately dishonest and pretty obnoxious.
It is, and I just think. I mean, we talk to Trey. We indulge him, but that in and of itself kills his argument, right? Because he cannot show the logical contradiction, which is what he needs to do in the notion. You don't, Trey. You don't, Trey. Let me finish. You can't show the logical contradiction in an uncaused event.
Okay, let's move on to natural theology. Come on, Floyd.
So your argument's dead there. That's good, just to bring that up and not that. But yeah, let's move on.
Anybody else converted to Jesus right now? No? Okay, let's go.
All right, natural theology. Sproul defines natural theology as knowledge of God as gained from nature in addition to and distinct from Scripture. So it's just a general revelation. So we look outside, we see trees, we see the ground, we see grass and so forth, and we say, okay, well that's been created. So therefore there must be some sort of creator creating them. And this is opposed from a special revelation, which is a direct revelation from God itself. Sproul appeals to Romans 1, which says we're without excuse. We all know that there is this God creator, but Romans 1 and Sproul never actually says, when we see creation, what does that actually tell us about the creator? When we see the creation, does it tell us that a Trinity created us? Does it tell us that Jesus was His Son,
no.
and that we're sinners? What does it actually tell us about the Creator when we look at creation? That's the question. And if Sproul admits that this Creator, His Creator, is a mystery, well, can we just look out at the creation and say, well, a mystery created these things, and
no,
nothing
what you're doing
more.
is you're saying that you can have no knowledge, and if I don't have full knowledge, then I have no knowledge. It's kind of like the.
No, I'm saying what knowledge at all. I'm asking what knowledge at all do we have. I'm not saying we have no knowledge. I'm saying what knowledge do we have.
Okay, knowledge, Floyd. Do you know that you are not self-existent?
Well, yeah, I know I came from my parents.
Okay, and your parents know that they're not self-existent, right?
Yeah. So again,
we know that we
could get to a point where there was some initial state, there was some initial thing in which everything else comes from. So when we look out at creation and say, okay, something, what we see now came from something else, and we regress backwards, perhaps we can say, okay, initially there was some starting point.
Right.
There was some starting point, or it could have been an infinite regress. But let's just stick with the starting point. What can we learn about this starting point simply by going out and noticing creation?
that our existence is a gift.
Yeah, after what?
What a plonker.
You are dependent upon that which gives you existence for your existence because you're contingent. That's what the word means, right?
What we say, okay, we look out and we see a bunch of contingent stuff, and we can say, okay, well,
And it's
perhaps something was necessary.
Right? Is it beautiful?
So there is something necessary out there, or was necessary, but by what can we learn? What can we learn? From more than that.
We can
how can we determine? We're sinners in need for a salvation. In need for salvation. We know this necessary being is a Trinity. We know that Jesus was the Son. All this stuff. That's what I'm asking. What can we actually know?
We can know
without excuse. What exactly are we out without excuse about?
Okay, we can know that there is a creator, and since we've been given the gift of existence, we should be thankful for that. Number two, we can know that we are sinners. We all fail our own standard.
Where do you get that?
Yeah,
where do you get that?
Yeah.
That's Romans 2.
Top-notch drivel.
Right.
That's special revelation. That was one of my points.
No,
that's
not.
funny. It's funny that Christians claim that we're all without excuse through general revelation, and where do they learn that from? They learn that from special revelation. How can special revelation inform general revelation? You need to start in general revelation and go from there.
Special revelation confirms what we all know. Just because special revelation contains it does not mean that it becomes.
We all know that Jesus is the Son of God, and we need redemption through the faith of the crucifixion.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
Well, you claim that we all apparently know that we're all sinners and we need the salvation of the cross.
Floyd, do you have a standard for yourself that you do not meet?
Trey, can you answer the question?
I've failed myself a number of times. Yes.
Okay.
And
so there's a standard, right?
But being able to idealize the perfect human condition is not the same as there being that thing there, right?
Yeah.
Or there being
But
some sort of sense to that.
you all act as if axe murderers are objectively bad, do you not?
we act that they're harmful to ourselves, and we don't.
That's right.
We don't want harm.
You have this instinct in yourself that existence is holy, right?
No,
we don't.
That is
Not
true.
holy, not holy.
Right,
Use another
hold
word.
on,
Okay,
I've got to chip in here. What Trey doesn't
Come on, Earth, give us a good one.
What Trey doesn't understand, amongst very much as well as being honest, is that our biology dictates that we naturally have a tendency to wish to flourish, to preserve ourselves, and wish to breed. And of course, so if we find that the
evolutionists do it.
So we also recognise that because we have to bring up our own children and things, we have to nurture them. We have a nurturing tendency.
Why do we have to, Rumpus?
Because our biology dictates that. Very, very simple. If we didn't, we would cease to exist. So we'd have no.
That's right. So what?
What do you mean? So what? I've just explained the
by our nature we want to live.
See, you just ask these questions.
By our nature we want to flourish and want to live.
Trey seems to think it's very strange that evolution would.
Right, so hold on. Trey's asked a question.
Why do you act like a
That's what we desire.
Trey's asked a question. I'd like to answer
it.
I would like to answer Trey's question. He's asked why do we wish to flourish or something like that. Because the evolution has delivered us as beings and all the animals that have led up to us. Those are the only ones. Hold on. The only ones that have survived are the ones that have bred and nurtured themselves and have flourished. All the other ones do not exist anymore. So we are the end product of a selection process of things that must flourish and that must breed. And so the answer to your question is why. It's very, very simple, and I've just done so.
Evolution did it.
Exactly.
Trey, I mean, come on, man.
What's your answer? What's your answer, Trey? God
well,
did this?
I am saying that
God
purpose, unintentionality cannot purpose anything. I'm saying God is an eternal.
Yeah, we know.
Yes.
Right. Let me explain how purpose. I mean, this is another thing that Trey has a problem with, is how purpose, as he calls it, comes about. As I explained to you in our hangout, in the prebiotic state, certain chemicals started to replicate, and those then were the ones that flourished and became more prevalent, and they became, and the more successful they were, the more prevalent they became, and there was a natural selection process that led to what you would perceive as purpose. So you ended up with very besides even the prebiotic stage, chemicals that were more prevalent became more common, and then those then developed into biotic systems where even things like amoebas. I don't know whether you regard an amoeba as having purpose. Do you? Do you think an amoeba has purpose, and bacterium?
All contingent existence has purpose, otherwise it wouldn't be.
That's
You know
that's
what? I don't know why I like you so much.
Hold
You're
on,
very
hold on,
mean.
hold on. Do you believe a bacterium has? Do you believe that a
Sorry.
bacterium has purpose? So if I can demonstrate that a bacterium has acquired purpose through an evolutionary process, I've delivered the emergent property of purposeness from non-purposeness.
Does a glacier have a proper? Does a glacier, retreating ice sheet towards the sea down a gradient? Does that have a purpose, Trey?
Well, from God's perspective, yes. But what I want to focus on is your intentionality as an intender.
Yeah, hold on. I want to focus on the question about whether if I can demonstrate that an amoeba has purpose, that's demonstrates.
I'm saying from God's perspective it does, but from our phenomenological perspective, let's focus on rumpus.
Well, yeah, but you see,
That's
I
kinda
can
hard,
demonstrate
isn't it?
very easily that if an amoeba has purpose through an evolutionary process, that I can demonstrate I will acquire purpose.
I'm not saying it has personhood. That's the difference. That's the big thing when you talk about it. You have personhood, do you not? And you say, "Oh, I'm a determinist," and then you get mad.
That's a piece of drivel. That's personhood is just a piece of drivel. I'm just a mammal that's evolved from amoeba-like creatures. So this is an entirely made-up, essence-y property thing, a piece of bollocks that you manufactured for, well, out of nothing.
Does drivel taste good?
I don't know. You spout so much of it. You would. You tell me.
Do you like me?
I
could put up with you being an idiot. I can put up with you being an idiot and willfully ignorant and stupid. I can put up with those three things. What I can't put up with is the way you treat Fox in post and your dishonesty in here and your deflection in arguments like refusing to justify, for instance, things like the immutability, how you self-existence leads to mutability and omnipotence of a universe. And
sorry, Rumpus, I just interrupted. You're not mean to me, but you are dishonest. You are dishonest.
And I call myself a Christian.
Well, indeed you do.
Exactly.
But you've the thing is, Trey. I mean, I think when I initially started to talk to you, I was wondering, well, maybe he's just not understanding what I'm saying. Maybe I've failed to communicate it properly, or maybe I'm not understanding what he's saying. But now I think we've reached the point where I can understand, and looking at the Sproul video, I can see where you come from. I can understand where you come from, and I can then ask these questions and try to pass them out in a way that anybody who can understand them as much as you display you can understand elsewhere should be able to get this, and you just flatly refuse to answer the objections properly and honestly. And it isn't just from me, you do it with
in a way that makes you look good.
I don't care about that. In a way that answers the objection and deals with it properly, and you just deflect and dodge, and that is fundamentally dishonest. So you can say you occasionally have little gripes here and there, which I don't particularly care about. That's not important to me. What is important is that you are fundamentally you've reached a point where you have just become dishonest, and I think it is like I don't know if you know Aaron Ra, who is an atheist who talks about evolution, and one of the things he says when he talks to young Earth creationists is that they're either, at some point they are going to lie, they're going to become dishonest, because at some point when you've shown them how they are wrong and they still refuse to accept it, that's when they've got to lie. And that's what you do, Trey. You've done it, you've been shown by me, by Ozzy, by pretty much everyone else in this room and other people. Yeah. You are fundamentally dishonest. You cling to this argument. You cannot show basic contradictions, which should be easy to show when they appear. You can't do that. You're unable to rebut the objections. You're unable to discuss this seriously. You can't talk about evolution without committing genetic fallacies, and you can't talk about pretty much anything without inserting in. So when I ask you a question like, I'm trying to break down what you mean by purpose, saying that maybe there might be a communication error here. When I ask, say, does a glacier have purpose? Well, you say from God's perspective, yes, it does. That begs the question, doesn't it? We're trying to say from our perspective, why should we think, as we don't believe in God, that a glacier has
And I'm trying
purpose?
to say, focus on you. Don't worry about the glacier, and you don't want to do that.
Because we're talking about because from our perspective, the stumbling block is we want to say, how can we go from organic system, from chemistry
Fox in the know.
to biology. How can we make that leap? Now, we don't know everything, but we have...
You don't know anything.
We do have some very good, and that's very, again, a dishonest and ignorant thing to say, because we do have scientists who are working very hard to come up with hypotheses, working hypotheses for abiogenesis, which is far better than going to the Bible and saying that.
Oh my goodness!
That the accounting.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, you killed it, brother.
If you want to weigh them up, Trey, you want to weigh them up. Okay, you know which way that's going to come down on.
Yeah.
So it's.
I've never won an argument, have I, Fox? Not one.
I don't think you have.
No, I'm not aware of you having. Because you never present one. For instance, you still have yet to present why a self-existent universe is immutable. You have not presented any argument for this at all. All you do is you say, "Does it happen?" when in reference to uncausality.
No, you're don't so actually pathetically ignorant, my friend. You can't grasp it.
No, you do not offer an argument. It's quite simple. It's so objectively evident that you do not offer arguments.
Change denotes effect by definition.
No, it doesn't. Are you stupid bastard?
False. That is false.
Jesus, I mean, this is so stupid. Do we think he's this stupid?
No, that is false.
You can define it like that. You can go from that de dicto necessity, but you cannot show how there is a de re necessity that follows from it. You can't do that. Just because you define words in a certain way doesn't mean that reality has to work that way, right? It doesn't logically follow. This has been known in philosophy for a very long time.
Trey thinks if he defines event as an effect, he's done the job, but you just can't assert that. And I don't think he understands about zero either.
You can't define a cause as being changed. That's the equivocation is your problem, my friend. You need to use univocal language when you talk about
causes create change. No one disputes that.
Yeah, we're not saying that causality. I mean, we're not saying that. When we talk about causality, there's nothing going on there. We're just saying we're approaching it from a different. We don't say that there are these distinct things out in the world. We don't think that God is the power pack of the universe. We don't think like that. We think causality is essentially a relation between two events in space and time. That's how we understand causality. That's what.
Right, and they're both events, right?
And they're both
events, right?
That's not an effect.
Events. Of events related in space and time in a certain way. Listen, Trey, an event related to another event in a certain way is when we observe that, we determine from that what's a cause and what's an effect. Okay, cause and effect is contingent upon our ability to assess reality. It's a relationship. It's a relator. It isn't something distinct and other from the events that we observe, right? That's how we see cause and effect. So in that case, we can easily, well, we can't easily, but we can think how if space and time began to exist, and if causality is contingent upon space and time, then it doesn't make any sense actually to say that the beginning of space and time would have a cause. Why would we say that a derivative relationship of between spatial and temporal events would be a necessary precondition for the beginning to exist of space and time? That completely gets it the wrong way around. So we're trying to, from our perspective, we don't see causality the way you see it and the way you define it. And you can't prove that it is that way. You can just
I prove it over and over and over.
No, you don't. You just assert it either by definition.
I assert that in effect a cause ultimately has to be self-existent. Yes, I do, because it can't happen if it happens.
You assert that, and you have no argument to back up your assertion.
Okay. Did you guys want to continue or no? I got about 10 minutes.
Well, perhaps let Floyd get on to the next subject because he's got some other issues I think he has to get through, doesn't he?
Well, when we've done destroying Trey, we can get.
I think part 13 is irrelevant. Before I go to 13, I just want to end with 12. You know, when we look out in nature, what do we see? What I see is a lot of suffering. So what does that teach us about this God, if this God exists?
That he's holy.
Well, no, not at all. I mean, it means this God is uncaring. That's what it means.
According to Christianity, why do we have suffering?
Well, I was just going to get onto that. According to Christianity, death and suffering is a result of man's sin, but through general revelation, we see death and suffering existing before sin came into the picture. So that's why Sproul and people like that reject evolution, because it's a threat to Sproul's theology. That's why evangelicals are so much against evolution,
so you're
because
assuming
it teaches that death and suffering is not a result of man's sins. Therefore, your whole theology just falls apart.
Oh, so you just assume your conclusion and say that's the way it must be, even though you've not empirically.
Well, no, that's is what we observed.
Well,
We scientifically observed
You're
that
a big
death
fat
and suffering has
scientist, huh?
existed before humans were created.
But
Therefore,
Trey,
your whole theology fails. Your whole theology fails, and Christianity fails.
How do you know that empirically?
Oh, because
Well,
we have
suffering
the fossil
exists.
record.
I'm sorry?
Through the fossil record, through history, through science.
So
we
you
know
weren't
all
there.
this stuff.
So
Well,
you're not talking about empirical science right now.
Floyd, Trey's
that
You're
old
extrapolating about the past by looking at the present.
employing the Ken Ham "were you there" argument now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Desperate.
Were you there in the
Well, you know,
lab?
that's simple. That's what that funny thing science means in the category we're talking about. But of course, when it's convenient, we don't use it.
No.
No. Science
There
is.
when God created the universe too, right?
We
Yeah.
don't need to replicate the events. All we need to do is
You need to see them, don't you?
No,
we
we
need to
don't.
show them to be
No,
plausible.
Okay,
absolutely
so science
not.
is not empirical then.
Yes, it is.
In persons is just observation.
We have to be able to replicate the results that the events would create.
So you're guessing
The police don't need to be at the crime scene when the crime happens to put together how the murder took place.
That's right. It's called historical science, right?
Do you believe in
No,
hold on.
Dad,
Do you believe in continental drift, Trey?
Probably not.
yeah, probably not.
Do you believe in continental drift, Trey?
I do. I believe the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
Right. Well, we can't see that happening. We can't. For instance, we do not know that we have not seen the South America and Africa join up together, but we can we abduce it.
That's right, and I'm not saying I believe it infallibly. I'm just saying it seems to be like that's where it is. Are you saying that we can't make any guesses about how things happen?
Yes, you were the one who's denying that, not me.
No, I'm not.
But I mean,
I'm saying you're putting historical science. You're not. It's not empirical directly.
The real point here, Trey, is that natural theology is meant to be gathered from nature, from our observations of nature, and that's the real problem. Is that even if we would accept RC Sproul's assertion that we can know our guilt and know the existence of a God, we still don't have the instructions on how to be saved, and that
You're exactly right.
still allows an excuse for the unbeliever to not find God, doesn't it? And I mean that is the whole point of natural theology, is that it's meant.
No, it's not.
It says right here. I mean, in part 12, 1920, he says natural theology is to ensure the foundation for the universal guilt of man, and that is its only basis. And yet we have an excuse for not finding Jesus, because not everybody gets access to the special revelation. He even says not everybody.
John, you just proved your point.
But why would knowing our guilt be enough to make us guilty of the actual fact? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how would simply knowing the guilt of my existence be a condemnation of my existence? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if I cannot do otherwise, how would I be expected to do otherwise? How could anybody judge me for not doing otherwise if there was no possibility of me finding that option?
Why does your conscience bother you, John?
It doesn't. When I'm operating
you've never
properly.
been sorry about anything you've done.
Guilt and shame are social constructs that are imprinted into us from a very young age. So people may feel guilty about something here. I may feel guilty about spitting on the floor here, where someone else on another side of the world won't feel guilty about sitting on the floor. So conscience is clearly a subjective element that we're constructing.
I think your biology also causes you to occasionally feel have a conscience. I think, John, it's a social and I think a biological thing. So, for instance,
for the goal of existence,
definitely.
Brilliant, Rumpus. Brilliant. You guys are so smart.
Before we move on to the next subject, I think we're supposed to be moving on to the next subject. I would like to say one thing. Everybody else in this room, other than Trey, knows that there's no such fucking thing as historical science, right? That's some creationist made-up bullshit. Yeah. There's just science. There's just science. There's no observational science and historical science. I think we all saw that when Ken Ham debated Bill Nye.
It's desperate stuff.
It's very desperate stuff.
Yeah.
All right, part 13.
Sorry, on 12. Did you see the bit about in part 12 that Sproul felt that even Africans who are living in have never been subjected to any sort of any influence from God, any influence from Christianity, were as guilty as anybody else, guilty of rejecting God, and therefore presumably were damned simply because they were in a bush somewhere in the middle of Africa, and there's apparently in their hearts they were idolatrizing and rejecting God, and they were rejecting what they knew in their hearts. I mean, I just found that absolutely objectionable on so many levels and just so ridiculous.
Are you saying it's immoral, Rumpus?
My biology drives my morals, as does my social situation. The fact that you don't understand.
So you're judging, right?
Sorry?
Are you judging?
I'm allowed to judge, yes, why not?
Sure.
Trey, I feel guilty about a lot of bad things I did in my life, and
they're centered around the specialness of existence, right?
No.
What?
Would you feel guilty if you murder somebody for pleasure?
Yes, I'd feel guilty. Yes, I feel horrible about that.
Directed by biology.
You did not treat life as special, right?
Well, yes,
You
it's
didn't
special.
treat your neighbor as you were.
It's special to me. Yes.
Intrinsically special.
Yes. Why is that? That's the question.
Do you think ISIS thinks life's intrinsically special?
No, you're changing the subject here. You're changing the subject. I feel guilty about things. Okay, so what does that mean? Besides me feeling guilty, feeling bad about it, what does that mean?
I am asking you to justify it because you said it doesn't really matter, objectively speaking.
Well, you can
I never
justify
said
it.
that.
Trey,
I said I
so the
objectively
universe
feel bad about the bad things I did in my life.
The universe cares about you, right, Floyd?
No.
No, the universe doesn't care about me. No.
Okay, then why are you so? I want you to justify why you have this feeling of the specialness of existence when it really isn't true.
Biology drives it. It's a very, very
What?
simple.
biology is.
What do you mean it isn't true?
Just so story.
You're just
No,
an idiot.
it's not a just so story, Trey. It's
Why do you
not.
say it isn't true?
It's just
It's
pathetic.
not really true.
Trey, we can give.
What do you mean
we
not
can
really
give
true?
an
What
account.
does that mean?
You might not like it, but it's still an account.
Yes.
Right?
You have this emotion that life is special, but it's not really true.
No.
It's not really.
Where'd you get that?
Isn't that your position?
That the universe does not care about you, but you care.
Why does the universe need to care?
Because that's the standard that you're referring to. You're saying
No,
people
I'm
should
not.
not.
No.
Excuse me.
No, I'm not.
Non-entities don't have to care about me, Trey. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Non-entities don't have to care about you. Well,
No, I mean, no, it doesn't matter if the flower cares about me.
But I'm asking you, John. Tell me why it is that you standard existence.
There's what do
Who
you mean by
says it doesn't
standard
matter? You
existence?
keep on
That's a
saying
weird
that.
phrase. Like standard for existence. What does that even mean? What are you talking about? Are you talking about my respect for other human life? Or are you talking about my respect for conscious creatures?
Basically begging the question again.
You have
basically
a moral
equated
standard here.
You've equated existence to mean like a whole pile of very specific entities, and I don't think you're quite understanding that. That you can't just say standard for existence and expect me to pick out what it is that you're talking about.
Do you believe in stewardship of the earth, John?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
is
why
it
wouldn't I?
impersonal?
What do you mean? Is it impersonal? Is the Earth impersonal, or is my stewardship of that Earth impersonal?
The earth itself. Is that what you think is valuable?
The Earth itself isn't an entity which cares about me.
We care about the earth because it serves our needs.
And the needs of our children.
If
someone's
the earth was going to be destroyed, we'd go in spaceships and go to some other planet.
Yeah, Trey. I mean, Trey. I think what Trey's doing throughout all of this little rabbit hole is, again, it's question begging, because he is equating the only answers to these questions that are acceptable to Trey when you say these things have some intrinsic value given to them by God, right? When we give an account of why we have these particular psychological states towards each other, towards the earth, towards animals, whatever it is, why we feel guilt, why we are moral, he just laughs and laughs and laughs and says, but why, continuously begging the question that the only way that the question can be answered is by answering it in a way that he thinks it needs to be answered, which is that it's intrinsic value, endowed by God.
Saying it comes from God does not answer the question either.
Right,
There's no explanation.
It's just
No explanation at all.
It doesn't.
It's rationally coherent as opposed to yours.
No, it's not. It's not an answer at all.
Does God have intrinsic value to himself?
Indeed, he would. He would have to. Otherwise, he'd be an idolater.
What?
The gibberish that comes forth is quite extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be some... Jesus Christ. I mean, and
Otherwise, it would be
also,
perfect.
so the way that Trey also says, surprisingly, where do you get these things? And we always come back with biology, and he always expresses sort of surprise that, oh gosh, I hadn't thought of that. I didn't think you might be thinking biology might be the cause of that. I mean, this is all a dishonest, deceitful performance. It's just revolting.
Should we move on to the next part?
To the next
Yeah, why don't we move on?
Okay, after the next one, I probably need to get going. I got to get some work done, and I got another hang after.
Part 13, Natural Theology, Part 2. He starts with the double truth theory, where a proposition can be true in philosophy and science, but false in theology, or vice versa, that it could be true in theology, but false in philosophy and science. And he says certain Muslims have taught this, and Sproul basically rejects this idea.
Who's
that,
echoing? Someone's echoing.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's echoing.
Can't be me.
Anyway, so he rejects the idea that there's a distinction of truth between reason and faith and religion and science. He says there's all. In fact, I have a separate quote from Sproul. That's not in the lecture, but I think it's fitting. He says, however, if something can be shown to be definitely taught in the Bible without questioning, and someone gives me a theory from natural revelation that they think is based off of natural revelation that contradicts the Word of God, I'm going to stand with the Word of God 100 times out of 100. But again, if I have to repeat, I could have been a mistaken interpreter of the Word of God. So he's saying if someone presents something through natural revelation, through scientific inquiry, for example, contrary to the Bible, he says, well, I'll stick with the Bible, but he pretty much feels that he must be misinterpreting the Bible because science and his faith must be aligned. They cannot contradict each other. But I see contradictions between the Bible and science all over the place. Geocentrism, for example.
Genesis.
Genesis. I see a contradiction in Genesis itself. There's actually two creation stories, one in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2.
Oh
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Bible teaches basically geocentrism and Earth. Absolutely. Yes, that there's a dome firmament. Yeah, Genesis 1 teaches there's a dome firmament above us in which the stars, moon, and sun are attached.
That's not what the firmament means.
Yes, it does. It absolutely. In Hebrew it means beaten out by metal.
That's right.
Rakia
right.
is the Hebrew root word. It means beaten out by metal.
Right.
That was a view, and that was a view that the neighboring cultures had. There was a flat Earth with a solid dome firmament above us.
It does not teach that. Nobody's ever.
It absolutely does teach that.
I mean, but Floyd, Sproul says that we get the truth in the world, and sometimes that science is meant to correct the church's understanding, but Sproul says that they're not correcting the Bible; they're only correcting the theologians' reading of the Bible or understanding of the Bible.
Right.
So that's an easy escape plan, right?
I
think that's
if we point out contradictions.
Yeah, that's silly.
It's still a matter of interpretation, and until it's proven scientifically, I think Sproul would go with the theologian's interpretation.
Yeah, so science has to inform the theologian. That's pretty funny. And what happens when scientific theory changes, like when we go from a steady state model of the universe to the Big Bang inflationary model of the universe, then are the theologians going to change their theology at that point? Is William Lane Craig going to change his cosmological argument at that point? Because he relies on the Big Bang theory for the universe having a beginning. So again, they're just having to mold their theology to science as new scientific discoveries come about over time.
Yeah, and like as you said, it goes both ways. Sometimes science has informed theologians, and theologians have informed science, as I'm doing right now.
Name one Name one scientific theory that was overruled by a supernatural causation.
All of them that Fox has tried to affirm, speaking of effects without causes.
He's never asserted an effect without cause, you stupid bastard. He's
Stop
never
that.
asserted an
Stop that,
effect
Rumpus.
hasn't got a cause. He's never ever said that. He's only said events can sometimes not have a cause, not effects. Jesus Christ! I mean, what a plonker!
So Trey, when you reject what the Bible says about the firmament, about it being fixed on pillars and so forth, what's happening is
It doesn't say that.
Yeah, yes, it does.
I mean, you're just taking these things that you read out the creation,
No,
whatever.
I've been studying this stuff for a very long time. I've probably been studying the Bible a lot longer than you have, Trey. 'Cause you don't seem to be very informed about the Bible.
Oh, no, I don't know a thing.
Yeah, the point
That's
is
the
you have
first
to
honest thing he
twist.
said.
You have to twist Scripture to match science. And again, what happens when scientific theories change? You're gonna have to twist the Scripture again.
I've never had to twist the Scripture.
I mean, RC Sproul lays out, I mean, he says that all truth is God's truth, and that all truth meets at the top, right? So, I mean, he's going to see it as, even if science discovers something, that was in the Bible beforehand. I mean, God had to have understood that before we discovered it, right? And I think that's how Sproul would argue it.
Well, Sproul's not a presuppositionalist. But what we're searching for is an M theory.
Not entirely.
What do you guys think about M theory?
M theory.
I don't know enough about it to.
Well, it's essentially it's a desire to find a theory for everything, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah, but I don't know about his current.
That's what I'm searching for. That's what RC Sproul is searching for. We're searching for M theory. We're trying to make coherence out of chaos.
No, there's no searching going on. There's just expounding on bollocks. There's no searching going on. There's no look for revision. There's no look for critique. There's no look for logic. There's just assertion of ancient.
Oh, yeah. You certainly demonstrate that in this hangout there, Rumpus.
But Trey, I mean, the problem with having M theory as the goal is that you will be very tempted to go with the first panacea that you can find. You know, the first thing that answers everything and seems to encompass all fields. I mean, ends up seeming like the real answer, and I think that's the real problem with trying to determine those things.
So we need to be open to change, right?
And M theory is an attempt to construct a scientific theory of everything, and there would still, there still might be philosophical work to be done afterwards. So
science is based on philosophy.
Science is based on philosophy.
Of course.
There are philosophical underpinnings to science.
Okay, great.
But it isn't as if they're doing the same thing, are they? So the scientists will look at it from one direction. The scientists
you can't do one without the other.
You can't do science without philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
No, that's bollocks.
Well,
you're saying that without philosophy we could never have found. I don't know. You could never have discovered the cure for.
What does philosophy mean, Fox?
Well, the literal meaning of philosophy is the love of wisdom.
Right.
Yeah.
What is wisdom?
Oh, God. Trey, why we're not going to crack out the deepities at them.
Here we go.
So I'm back to the universe.
There's no need for that. But my point is, Trey, that I think you say you're going about doing an M theory, and I think that I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I'm saying is that the philosopher doesn't necessarily do the same thing. I think philosophy is about trying to clarify what there is and make sense, right. but sometimes in articulating that they articulate what we don't understand. And
that's true.
It's about it's a critical method. It's about deconstructing our common sense intuitions and our beliefs, and also about what science tells us. So science produces something from, say, quantum theory that is empirically valid, that affect other common sense intuitions, and science is about, well, how do we is there any way of reconciling the two things? Is there a way of actually showing how intuition's wrong, and so we should probably go with what the science is telling us. So it isn't necessarily about, we're not just about this top-down view of let's just try and bundle all this up to make some kind of coherent sense. I mean, that's not what we're doing. Along the way, we often find divergences. Along the way, we often find divergences, and we get stuck on very, what seemingly used to be quite a simple issue gets taken apart and becomes 5 different other fields and areas. So that's the way that philosophy develops. If anything, it's gone in the other direction. It's constantly taking apart of concepts and ideas rather than putting them together. So it's a decoherence rather than a.
But for the purpose of coherence, right?
For the purpose of clarity, I would say.
Right.
But I don't think that's necessarily the same thing as coherence.
Okay, listen. Well, whatever. I need to get going, guys. I got to get some stuff done. I had an oven break, and I got to finish it. But I mean, if you want to, we can continue this or whatever you want. But thank you for inviting me. And I must say that, John, I very much appreciated your input. You're very thoughtful, and it really was helpful to interact with you. I enjoyed that. And
someone's got to help you out here, Trey. I know.
Yeah,
I know you made a lot of enemies.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to make any enemies, but I do want to hopefully be true to my own conscience and true to what I perceive to be true, and I could be wrong. But
no, come on, Trey. Now, you say that, but then when you are shown to be wrong, you refuse to accept it. That's dishonest. Now, come on. Now, maybe you honestly want to believe that, but please do reflect back on the way you behave and realise that. Actually, when you are shown to be wrong about something, you won't accept it, and also you say that you come here.
It's got to make sense to me, Fox. I cannot accept your view just because you like it.
But sometimes no. But sometimes if something doesn't make sense to you, that's because either you don't understand it, or the thing that you believe that is the obstruction to it is the problem, and that's what you need to get rid of.
That's wholly possible.
And you're not, you were refusing to accept that.
Okay, well, maybe so.
I would ask you, Trey, and I would honestly ask you to reflect on what we've said and the way we approach things, and try and either really get this down in a concrete way and define what it would take for us to show that you are wrong, or look at our objections seriously and try and show a contradiction where you think you see it and what it is specifically you mean by a contradiction. Go away and do that. And I think then you will find that people will be a lot more willing to engage with you and listen to you.
Okay. All right. Well,
thank you, guys. For coming along.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the interaction, and maybe we'll do it again, okay?
We've got more to analyse, certainly.
Okay. All right, Rumpus. We'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
You should have told him at the end about being wrong and all that, and then just go, quit with that giggling shit. Because I think people can, even if he doesn't accept, someone else's counter or whatever, the fact that he laughs in their face and talks to them like they're a child, I think, is what turns people off. I can deal with something if I have a counter he doesn't accept, but if he's gonna be mocking toward everyone he speaks to, that's the real reason why I think no one, or at least the majority of the people, don't want to speak to him. I
don't mind the mocking so much. I'm prepared to just call him out and say it's discourteous. But the thing that annoys me most is the dishonesty and the thing that the sudden, oh look, it's the biology. He hadn't thought that we might have an answer for biology, or the uncaused event. Or he kept on trying to sneak in. Oh, but that's an effect again by defining himself into a position of being correct, ignoring what you said to him for the previous 10 minutes. I mean, we do the courtesy of actually taking on board what he says and abusing it. But at least we had taken on board and respond to it in an honest, possibly abusive manner in my case, and a very considerate manner in Floyd's case. But at least I think we're honest, and we do try and absorb, and we don't play the dishonest, deceitful trick, which he does, and it's just
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is that he has a problem with self-existence cannot change. That's his claim.
Yeah.
If something's self-existent, it cannot change. And I like to hear an argument for that. And why can't something change by its own nature?
Yes, I mean, I wanted to pursue that a bit further, but you seem to want to go. I didn't want to take over on that issue, but
also, what gets me is you will often hear, and you hear, this is something that Sproul says as well. He will say, if there was ever a time when there was nothing, which in and of itself doesn't make any sense because time is something. But he actually says this: if there was ever a time when there was nothing, then there would still be nothing, right? So how is that different from if there was ever a time there was something that couldn't change and never changes, that there would be anything other than that thing that doesn't ever change?
And in fact, that just reminded me that
where's this? Just because there's something, you've got that something there, but you were saying that it can't change by definition, but it needs to change because it is the thing which brings about something else.
Exactly.
And it did change according to him.
Yeah, I mean,
not in a way that matters or something. I'm still confused.
And the other thing, Fox, with you, you
Changes and
said
it doesn't
you
change.
expressed amazement that you were offering an infinite regress argument, given the fact that I think in 50% of the times I've seen you interact with him with regard to first cause, you've always offered your position as being one of infinite regress. And then he expressed, amazement, but you're going to imply infinite regress, aren't you? Yes, you stupid bastard. That's what I've been saying to you for the last 6 months, in every single post on this subject. Oh.
Right, but I mean, Trey needs, or I mean, especially, you know what? Trey's giggling used to bother me quite a bit, but now that I've watched this whole RC Sproul lecture series, I feel like he comes about it very honestly. Like, I feel like Sproul really is sort of asserting his own intellectual superiority over his critics pretty much constantly throughout this whole lecture series, and he does go as far as to make fun of the people who posit things that he views it critical to his own theory, right? And I think that, you know, he even goes as far as to, like, you know, put his finger in front of his lips and make sounds and, like, try to pretend like these people are being irrational for
nonsense statement.
his assertion, right? And I think that that's, I mean, he goes as far as to say that, you know, even other theologians use contradictions and they're just saying nonsense statements. And
Schaefer, I think he was having a go, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I think that's a really crazy attitude to have when you're in academic circles like that, and I think that that's what Trey's picking up on, that Sproul sort of made that intellectual assertion of superiority, and that's really where he's deriving that authority to make these pronouncements for.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I was just going to say, I think watching this series back, and because when I first watched it was quite a while ago when I was first interacting with Trey, and I didn't watch it all, I watched parts of it. But watching it in its entirety, trying to see it from his perspective, and he says that he'd already picked up on Sproul. So I think he'd already read some of Sproul, probably got a good impression of him, thought he was someone who was, you know, an interesting guy who knew what he was talking about, making a good in-house case for theists. I think there are elements where Sproul is quite good as a theologian, but he's very poor as a philosopher and an apologist, because he makes these glaring errors. But I think the package, the way it moves, it's very condescending. It's very dishonest and disingenuous, and I think it could hoodwink people, and I think it hoodwinked Trey. And I think Trey swallowed it and absorbed it. He says he's watched it many times, and so you can hear it in those discussions. He just recalls the bits of Sproul and he just spews them out.
Yes, I mean, I
have a slight more sympathy for him, having watched it, to see it as a thing that is buried itself like a parasite into Trey's brain. And
yes, I mean, you can see that Sproul is doing that all the time. He also does things like most sort of cult leaders. He tries to get everybody to believe that this is the majority view and everybody take pity on them. And also this, obviously, the whole religious thing about you should feel great, which Trey mouthed, and I suppose most evangelicals do, about you having to feel grateful for having the gift of existence, and this sort of trying to undermines people's self-worth. So which I suppose is just a religious sort of tactic, is a classic cultist trick of trying to reduces people's self-worth such that they only get sort of value from the external thing. And I think Floyd's point about this coming together lark of the God, and that he was making lecture 12 when there was no contradictions that Floyd made. I think it's just, I mean, it should be so apparent to anybody that science, you know, because he in that lecture was supposed to get science and scripture come together with this natural theology. But the Genesis account, I can't understand how Trey Sproul can think there aren't any contradictions there. They're wide open there, as Floyd said.
But the thing about RC Sproul is he is a conspiracy theorist, right? He actually employs, well, it may not be, I'm not saying he's the truth or anything like that, but he actually employs a conspiracy theory throughout this series, which is that there is, in academia, in atheistic circles, this fundamental relativism and irrationalism, this refusal to accept the law of contradiction or things as obvious as causality, that we have this whenever we come at, and he makes a distinction, he calls on Calvin where he says, you know, there is a distinction to be made between persuasion and proof, right? Yeah. We can offer the proof, but they won't be persuaded because their hearts are hardened against God. They've chosen, and that's a conspiracy theory. That's deploying a top-down, overgeneralized framework and saying that the reason why these things are popping up is because of this. Right? There is this historical narrative that comes from spontaneous generation, this conspiracy of spontaneous generation, which atheists liked because it got them away from God. It meant they could escape having to deploy God, and they've kept it, even though it's been falsified by by science. They've kept it up, and when they go to do their quantum physics, they read chance into events and say that chance is a cause. We don't do anything of this.
Yeah.
It's highly conspiratorial thinking, really, and it's not that dissimilar from the idea that creationists have, where scientists are all a part of a great big conspiracy to suppress the truth.
Yes, the suppression of truth is a big theme of his, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rejection of truth.
It drips from everything he says. He off-ground narrative of the rationalism of these people opposed to the truth of not only of the Bible but of natural theology. That these things just go together, and anybody who would be rational. In a lot of issues in there. Anybody would, in right minds would accept this. So clearly there has to be something going on. Just like creationists would say, well, it's clearly obvious that evolution is false and that creation is true, and then anybody who says anything different has to be a part of the conspiracy at some point. So that's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with an honest. We're not dealing with William Lane Craig here. And people say William Lane Craig is dishonest, but William Lane Craig goes up there on the stand. He may have his theological beliefs, and he may be quite, they're interested in the way he presents that, but he will present a philosophical argument, and he's talking about philosophy, and he's asking you to approach it from that angle. Sproul is this narrative, this honest, disingenuous straw man against atheism throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
That shouldn't exist in a series of academic lectures.
Can I just say, Fox, that you're a better man than me. I've seen you give that speech to Trey toward the end a couple times in your hangouts with them about, kind of take a step back and kind of look at what the objections are and all that good stuff. The only fly in that ointment is Sproul makes it very clear in his videos that you are not to give ground on any of those four primary points. And I think that's what's preventing Trey. Like you said, he drank the Kool-Aid so much with this that he's taken himself out of the realm of even having some sort of reflection on his position. It's keeping him from learning, essentially.
Yeah.
And I really think that when let's say Rumpus or someone brings up a point and he just says, well, does that happen, or do you happen, this and that, that's almost like when you go to a pre-supper and they respond with, how do you know that? It's not any sort of intellectual sort of sparring, or there's no point really.
It's a debating ploy.
Back onto you. So, and I don't know if we're doing this next week on Saturday or Sunday or okay.
I'd certainly like I'd certainly like to finish it off.
There he goes. Okay, because we got about 2 hours, so I don't know how long we're going to go, but are we going to finish off all? Was it part 20 or part 17?
I think we've probably done pretty much up into
about 14. I think.
into the. We're about at the point where we would start talking about the four.
Yeah, 15. I think is the four. The reality, reasons, illusion,
self-critique. Yeah. I mean, we could probably do that actually as a next part altogether. Maybe the 4 ways.
Yeah.
And
really go into detail on that.
So do you guys like that Trey was in the room from the beginning? Because I felt from the very beginning Trey was just heckling. I think after you made your first introduction, Fox, Rumpus said something, and just he didn't cut out. You opened up. Rumpus said something, and immediately he was like laughing and, "Oh, Rumpus, you showed me," And it's really hard to get points across. But actually, if we have a large panel, if he's just gonna keep heckling, because once he does that, everyone just sort of jumps in and
Well,
we keep on going to the same points too. It's like we're not addressing each lecture.
I'd agree with that. I could see, Floyd, that you would like to do that. Yeah, I mean, the thing was, I suppose, because I was having the technical issues, I was going bonkers for the first hour with various technical issues. I didn't, unfortunately, get a chance. I mean, I would like to have pinned down Trey on these couple of points that I'm particularly keen on. That I think things like the self-existence and immutability and a couple of others, and really go for it and focus on those properly for 10 minutes and then go on to the next one. But unfortunately, the couple of times we were distracted from that, so it was very difficult to pin him down.
I think the next part should be without Trey, and we should because I think they are where you really start to see the errors pile up like it's like a car crash. So I think the next part is where you really.
What you can do is you can pose the question, Fox, or have whatever Floyd read the next question, and then just give everyone like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Panel, and that way it's limited to 2 minutes to his rebuttal, or save him for the very end, and he can say our piece that he gets his 2 minutes, and then we can go on to the next thing, or maybe open it up. And that way, that way he can't cut in and make himself the center.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think we've maybe not we've maybe not got as far as we would have liked to have done, but I think we've got to the point where we can actually start to really focus in on the big errors. For me, those 4 ways are where you can. That whole approach is really where the meat and gravy come in, and where I think once you go deconstruct that and show that it's kind of very spurious, then that's when I think you can reject all of what Sproul's saying, pretty much.
Yeah, because with Trey here, we didn't really get an opportunity to see some more from Floyd and John on the various sort of theological issues, so I've been quite interested. But I just couldn't bear seeing Trey getting involved in the difference between general revelation and special revelation. Meanwhile, he's basically being dishonest in the hangout.
Yeah, the thing always gets me is these theologians, especially the Reformed ones, always refer to Romans 1. So yeah, you have special revelation informing us, telling us how we should look at general revelation.
Remind me what special revelation was, because I had to skip past that in the lecture. I went to did a great one on general revelation. He said he was going to go on to special revelation. I couldn't find the bit on special revelation.
He skips over it. He
sort
of mentions it
right.
as opposed to general revelation. Okay, you're right that Floyd's right that he seems to be mixing special and general revelation a little bit towards the end. So you get kind of this where he's saying that the salvation that's offered by Christ is actually special revelation. He sort of talks about divine revelation and sort of mixes the two there too. So it's
yeah, and again, I feel guilty about a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I've done in my life that I regret. But I haven't done anything that's a felony or anything. But would say I'm a mass murderer. Would say I've done horrific things, and I feel bad about it. And how do you go from I feel bad about the things I've done in life to I need to believe in the Trinity?
Or what if you don't feel bad about it?
Well, he was looking.
Say?
Sorry.
Well, we can reject the sociopath and so forth, but again, okay, yes, I feel guilty about things I've done in the past, and so what? I wish I didn't do them. I wish I could take it back, but I can't.
One of the main arguments there is that I feel bad for things that weren't wrong, or that I haven't done bad. I feel bad for things that I've done but weren't actually bad, and I think that's really where the main question goes. What is this thing that is inherent to us, or is it something that we are able to learn and manipulate?
Yeah, well, I think it comes from evolution, from us being social species and so forth. I think that's where it comes from. Yep. But again, he talks about, I think Sproul jumps from, we have a guilty conscience and we see things being created to, we need to believe in the cross. We need salvation and so forth.
Oh, is that Floyd? Is that a Sproul thing? That guilty conscience thing? Then is that another meme from Trey?
Directly. Sproul does bring that up.
Right. Okay.
Sproul, there is an interesting point in Sproul where he talks about the idea that people believe. Double truth thing. They believe in special creation on Sunday, but the rest of the week they believe in this idea that life is inherently meaningless. Right. That is just we come from just a group of molecules. He repeats the old mantra of, which is again a genetic fallacy, which is if you have originalness or emotionality, whatever it is that we have now, then you'll never get it, right? And that's what Sproul does. That he does the same genetic fallacy of, well, because it's not there at the origins of how these things develop, then it can't be there at the end. they can't be emergent. So he's against, again, this idea that we can emerge this from biology. We can have emergent properties of things like guilt and conscience.
Yeah,
and the idea that you can value existence and that existence can be special to you and to humans in general. Because and we can give a descriptive account for that. So we say, well, yeah, well, evolution would favour those creatures that have those traits.
Absolutely.
So that's why there are creatures that have those traits now.
Exactly.
They propagate, and that gives a reasonable, viable description of how that arose. That's more parsimonious because you're just working with the basic materials and showing how eventually, because of these processes, you get there. And Trey will just flatly refuse to accept that because it's in Sproul, where it's if you have from the start, the starting gun's fired, you have molecules in motion. You're never going to get anything above these purposeless, aimless, meaningless things to what we have. And that's there. So when Trey does what he does, that's just coming from Sproul. Sproul again that's how disingenuous he is. He commits, and that's how intellectually vapid he is, because he commits that genetic fallacy. Now, if you were an actual philosopher, you would be called on that straight away. That's the stuff of, the Ken Owen, the Ken Hams of this world. That's what category he's in. He's not. So it's just.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was trying to go on about the biology and the flourishing of prebiotic things and biotic things, he never actually. I mean, this is what's so infuriating. He doesn't actually counter with an argument. He just simply sort of scoffs, and he doesn't even consider the idea of an emergent property of purposefulness, and he never presents a counter argument. He just simply says, "Does that happen?" or something, or some other equivalent to the point, rather than offering an
evolution beat it.
Yeah, it's just
right. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a certain fluidity of the categories that sort of allows Trey to do that, right? And I think that's where the problem is. He doesn't feel like he has to give an argument because he can sort of just fluidly, whatever you're talking about, he can put it in a category and give the set response for that category, where he feels like he has this mystery that he can appeal to. And I think that it's something that Sproul is pretty guilty of, but I think that Trey sort of takes it to a different level where Trey will just grasp any possible answer and any possible category and try to just merge all of them together, which I think Sproul is a little more careful about.
Yes, I think Sproul is actually better than Trey. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Are there any Sproul debates?
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
I mean, I will give Trey credit for at least having his ideas being thrown against other people. I haven't seen Sproul have to do that.
That's the interesting thing, is because I just think I don't see RC Sproul as I see it as being aimed in-house. I don't think I think the sad thing about his apologetic is once you throw that against informed atheists, they are gonna, and Trey's had this against people of various levels of skills and specialties, or no specialties at all. They all throw it back and think, hang on a second, now I don't buy into that. I find that a little bit quirky and strange. For me, this is Sproul has this warm, cuddly, rambling,
almost preaching.
Yeah, he is. I mean, there are some other lectures that I've seen where he sounds like a preacher. He talks about the power of being and the pure being of God and all the rest. These deepities that really don't have much place in a proper academic discussion. He's all about that, and I just think that's what this is aimed at. I think it's a pretty aimless weapon to use against. I mean, it kind of falls back on the old classical arguments. Doesn't give them anything new, just rehashes them. Oversimplifies them in many respects. Shoehorns and the thing is, I mean, I think if you're an apologist, if you want people to go out there and use your stuff, you better give a good account of what atheists are going to actually say to you, and tell people honestly, this is what they'll say, this is the argument that they'll use, and try. I mean, that's what the better apologists do. But Sproul almost sets them up for a fall because he gives such an uncharitable characterization of how atheistic philosophy and science has marshalled itself against theism.
Yes, I think you're right about him preaching to the
they're
converted.
just irrational. Yeah, they're just being irrational.
It's an echo chamber for him because, as you say, he doesn't tackle the. You get the you get the impression he's avoiding the tricky arguments, so that just as he's trying to sort of comfort. It's almost like trying to wrap a blanket around these people and insulate them from the arguments that they might encounter. And he's certainly not trying to sort of evangelise. And so I think you're probably right. Actually, he probably doesn't do debates because he's more concerned with just reinforcing prejudices and the comfy certainties that he has.
But I also think maybe there is a mischievous element to it as well, because I think Sproul says, I think he's following Calvin, saying, look, it doesn't matter anyway, these people are just not going to understand this. They're not going to be persuaded by this. This is the proof. They're not going to be persuaded by it. Their hearts are hardened. This is just to shut their mouths. So we see that with Trey all the time. We interact with Trey and we don't get anywhere with it. We just they come up against the same wall of gobbledygook and gibberish. And that, I think, is deemed a success, because as if almost that stops us in our tracks.
Yeah, I think
so anyone, any Christian watching who might be a crisis of faith, see that and go, I just can't go up with all these fundamental answers.
Yeah, well, that's why, you see, I mean, I think you're more tolerant of Trey.
That's what it's about.
You see, that's why I'm keen to stop Trey being able to fend us off with gobbledygook. I'd like to be quite direct and focused on a particular issue, and then hammer it home until, well, something happens, something dramatic happens. Whereas I think perhaps you and Floyd and others are, trying to accommodate him a bit more, and I'm there to finish him off, so to speak. But yes, it's so yes, I don't.
Sorry, I'm going to have to.
Yeah, I think we probably come. I think it's probably had been quite long enough. But yeah, I'd certainly like to finish off the rest of them and get the theological positions that Floyd and John seem to specialise in, and perhaps do it next week or something, and then whether Trey comes in or not. Yes, I think who is it? Mischievous Heathens. I think we could sort of try and, if we do go through the lectures, to try and keep them to sort of perhaps 2 or 3 minutes from each of us or something.
Do we think maybe we could have maybe we'll have Heathens could be our moderator and sort of direct, if we could agree on a structure to it, and we can maybe then have him.
Though it was quite fun. I mean, when Trey said asking Floyd whether he's feeling guilty, it's just impossible to resist getting involved in the arguments associated with that. You can't just focus on the lectures when you've got issues like that coming up, and he throws in his sort of scoffing at evolution and God knows what else.
I'm more than willing to talk about my guilty conscience about the bad things I've done. I'm totally willing to admit that, but all that does not validate his theology at all.
Okay, then. So we'll do it next week and try and formalise a bit more if Trey's not here. But
I think we're better off without Trey, because it's the same arguments. The same arguments come up time and time again. We can pass them.
Yeah, and I think
he doesn't change.
He's immutable.
That's the problem. You can't change because RC Sproul said you can't give ground on those 4 points.
But again, I think
the problem.
At least anyone watching this will see. Here's a bunch of atheists who've let this guy on, given him the opportunity to speak, and he's blown it, and that's his lookout. We've been charitable. We've allowed him his chance to give something credible and defensible, and he's just waffled and given us and cackled like an idiot and done all the usual Treyisms have been spouted, and that's down to him. That's not us mischaracterizing him. We've tried to bridge the gap. We tried to understand him. It's just not working. So.
And I just got to say before we go, I do apologize if my laughter kind of creeped out, because I don't normally in my own hangouts and stuff, like, I can sort of keep it under control, but when I see other people dealing with Trey and they have a reaction, it's just so funny to just to hear like the script. Watching a movie you've seen over and over again, what's going to happen. It's just happened to somebody else, I apologize if that ruined anybody's experience, but
no, you can't not laugh.
Exactly. I noticed even Fox, you were laughing at one point. You had your face in your hands a couple of times.
Okay then. So I'll take us off air then, and
okay.
And let me just get that. Oh, right. And see next and
have a good one, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya.
Thanks for popping by.
I wanted to talk more about geocentric